Hello, and welcome to a second episode of Drawing the Owl, a tabletop RPG design vlog. This time I'm going to be doing a quick episode because I have a game of Lady Blackbird in about 40 minutes. But I'm going to talk for about half an hour about basic moves and why they're important to PbtA and how I'm going to approach them. As usual, just thinking out loud, there's really no structure to this, but to begin, I'm going to start by looking at a Twitter thread that Vincent Baker, the guy who created Apocalypse World, wrote about moves. And it's good, quick and dirty. It's a really, really good thing that I want to approach. But most importantly, before I start talking about things that a creator said, I want to make sure that we don't get too caught up in auteur theory and like games as voice of the creator. I'm a huge believer that games don't really exist until they're played at the table. It's a really, really good system, and it's a well-designed system, but it's not a game until it's brought out and until we bring our own work and our own baggage to it. So let's have a look at this. So Vincent posted this back in September of 2017, and the big thing about it is that it's Apocalypse World and PbtA define the compromises that people have to make when a move comes up. So, if you want to kill someone, you have to compromise. You want someone to do something for you, you have to compromise. So in Apocalypse World, all the basic moves say, when you want to talk about this, here are the compromises that you have to make. And here's how to negotiate. Here are the stakes and the boundaries of your compromise. If we have a look at the Apocalypse World basic moves, we can see that going aggro is a really good example. If you want to conduct violence on someone, you go aggro on them. And when you do, you make it clear what you want them to do and what you're going to do to them if they don't. And then you roll. Now, the interesting thing about go aggro is that once you roll, you as the player initiating the move don't have any authority over what happens. It is the person upon whom you are delivering the violence that is able to make that decision. So on a 10+, they have to choose, and they are given the limitations of which they choose, and that's a negotiation. What you're saying to them is, I'm going to deliver violence upon you, but I'm going to have to roll first because you have some capacity to respond to that. If your only intent is to deliver violence, then that goes into battle moves, but this is when you want them to do something. Then if I roll really well, and if I'm particularly hard, you need to, you can only respond by doing what I want or by forcing me to deliver that violence upon you. Which is great because it's a negotiation, right? It's that really, really clear structure. Now, the reason this is important is that in Blades in the Dark, which is the current system, or Forged in the Dark, which is the current system that's getting a lot of attention, this kind of negotiation occurs at the table. This is you saying to someone, well, let's talk about effect level and let's talk about position and that sort of stuff. In Apocalypse World, we don't worry about effect level and position because we don't want the table to have the negotiation before the dice are down. The negotiation is written into the system. And that is really good for games like Monster Hearts because I have that here somewhere. Let's find, here we go, Monster Hearts. The reason Monster Hearts is really important as a game that already has negotiation established is that you're playing disempowered characters. And those characters struggle to do things outside of very, very clearly defined boundaries. I make the example all the time that Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts doesn't have an adult conversation move. And in fact, if we look to the Monster Hearts growing up moves, there's things like calling people on their shit, intervening in violence. That doesn't exist in the basic moves. It is a negative design space that has been left out on purpose. Monster Hearts would not work in Forged in the Dark because it would offer the players more freedom and more competence than they should have. This design is built around these negotiations being limited. When you turn someone on, very much like Go Aggro, when you turn someone on, you do it and they choose their reaction and then you fictionally conduct your reaction to their reaction, and that is a really, really, really important part of Monster Hearts, and that's why if we go back to Vincent's conversation, you don't need to think of all your game's basic moves this way, but it's a really good starting position, and that's the direction that Apocalypse World was designed from. Is here is your position and here is your effect, essentially. So we're going to talk about basic moves and about why they're important. So let's go over to the game text that we have here. So this is the Google Doc we were working on before for Forged in the Forged in This War, which is still not a good name, but that's what we've got. We're going to talk about moves. So we said next time we're going to try and have a name, and we're going to talk about moves, examples, and analysis. And this is where we go. So move ideas. So Act Under Fire is a really, really common move in a lot of Apocalypse World games, or a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games. It's used when the outcome is in doubt, but there's not a move that you want to fit in there. So examples that we can look at are things like in Apocalypse World, it's Act Under Fire. The trigger for Act Under Fire is when you do something under fire or dig into endure fire, you roll plus cool. On a 10 plus, you do it. On a 7 to 9, you flinch, hesitate, or stall. The MC offers you a hard outcome, a correction worse outcome, hard bargain, ugly choice. And on a miss, the fire comes to bear. You prepare for the worst. And that is basically designed kind of like the World of Dungeons when you do something dangerous move is, insofar as it's meant to be a broad move that you slot in when the game asks something of you, or when you feel the game should ask something of you that it's not asking. Now, I don't like Act Under Fire as a move. I think it's poor design. I think that, for example, Monster Hearts we've just been talking about is all about these really, really tight design spaces, and yet when we have this keep your cool move, when you keep your cool and act despite fear, name what you're afraid of, roll with cold. On a 10 up, you keep your cool and gain insight. On a 7 to 9, you can either choose to continue or back down, go through with it. I understand why keep your cool exists. I understand why Act Under Fire exists. I don't really dig it. The benefit that I see behind, or actually another thing I don't like about Keep Your Cool is that it is a mechanical game that is a mechanical move that has a mechanical outcome. So there's this, we talked about, actually we haven't really talked about this before. Let's talk about the mechanical inputs, fictional outputs part of fiction first gaming. So I'll go over to some text and we can talk about this in a really good example. Okay, so let's talk about this here. So it's mechanical inputs, fictional outputs, vice versa. So the way this works is that Apocalypse World always demands that you loop your fiction into your mechanics, and then you loop your mechanics back into your fiction. So the way that this works is this. Let's find a move that I like, and let's find a move I like, and we'll go with it. This is really difficult because it's difficult to find a it's difficult to find a move that's doing this perfectly. Monster of the Week might do it. No, it's not going to. Okay. While I'm doing this, I'm just I'm going to not look for an example. I'm just going to start going with one. So Night Witches is a great game that I talk about a lot. So let's talk about Night Witches. Oh man, Night Witches really doesn't do it, and that's a big thing. So let's talk about this reach out move that exists in Night Witches, which is a move that you should be doing a lot because reaching out is awesome. So reach out. When you reach out, you reveal a significant new truth and then roll the dice. On a template, in fact, let's just grab all this text and we'll talk about it over here so we can edit it. Okay, so when you reach out to someone by letter or person, reveal a significant new truth. So this is a mechanical input. So this stuff here in this sort of deep red is a mechanical effect. And then blue will be our fictional stuff. So when you reach out, you roll the dice. On a 10 plus, you choose 2, 7 to 9, choose 1. These are both mechanical. And then this is where I think this move falls apart at the moment, because these are all mechanical, and then this is fictional. The way we really want our this needs to come down a bit so we can type underneath it. The way we really want our Apocalypse World, our PbtA moves to look is this. We want it to say, when you do a fictional trigger, you roll the dice. On a 10 plus, or actually we'll just say on a hit, on a miss, and on a partial hit. Okay. So let's talk about this. This is fictional trigger is obviously a fictional input, right? Then we have this mechanical output, which tells us to roll the dice. So we do, and that generates a mechanical output, which is a mechanical input, which is a hit, a partial hit, or a miss. And then we need to bring out a fictional output. So a fictional output should look like, let's do an example here, right? So we're going to do a Star Warsian type game. So when you fight with laser sword, you roll the dice. On a hit, you deflect. Let's say when you fight an army with your laser sword. Let's say hold off, because that's a more interesting term, right? Hold off an army with your laser sword. So this is like a Helm's Deepian Star Wars kind of thing, right? You deflect their blaster bolts, take no harm. On a partial, you hold them off. Oh, come on. You shouldn't be colored yet. You hold them off, but choose one, and it's either like you take harm, or it should be like, but choose one. You miss a bolt and take 1 harm, or it's like you your weapon is damaged in the fight. Cross it off your sheet. On a miss, this is for games that will dictate a miss condition. Some won't, but for example, we'll just take it on this one. So on a miss, you fall in battle, take 1 harm, and cross off. You fall in battle. What about you are overwhelmed and have to get yourself out? Take 1 harm and cross off a force point. I don't know, force point. Right. So what you'll notice is that this should be our structure of moves. So that's a mechanical effect. We have this blue, red interleaving throughout. So the fiction is that our Jedi is Helm's Deeping a stack of that's a laser sword for sure. Jedi is Helm's Deeping a stack of droids, and they're trying to look super cool, so they do this like move where they hold off the entire army with their laser sword. Now, that is a fictional input. It creates a mechanical output, which is, okay, let's go to this move. Then you deflect the blaster bolts on a hit, which means that mechanically you take no harm and hold the enemy at bay. So this is the thing that players are looking for in the red here. This is what they want, but it needs to be coached in the fiction because it's fiction first gaming and because it's about more than just what the fictional result is. So if the thing that gives Apocalypse World or Powered by the Apocalypse its freedom is the fact that it's fiction focused. So even though this conversation has gone on, it gives us freedom. The best example I can give you is hack and slash, right? So hack and slash is a dungeon world move that is about fighting in melee, and this is why it's super important. Right? So hack and slash, when you engage an enemy in melee, roll plus strength on a 10 plus, on a 7 to 9. Cool. So let's not worry about the colors for this one because it's going to take me too long. Instead, let's talk about why this move is actually a lot more flexible than it looks like. When you attack an enemy in melee, this is your fictional trigger, and it is super flexible because there are a lot of options as to what attacking an enemy in melee can look like. So what can trigger hack and slash? It could be standing with a shield, holding people off at standing with a shield, picking off the outsides of an army. It could be charging in, whirling battle axe. It could be a one-on-one duel. It could be a lot of things, right? So these are all fictional triggers. This is a fictional response, right? So this is really, really cool because you deal your damage to the enemy and avoid their attack is actually a bit more fictional than it is mechanical. It looks like a mechanical thing, right? Like if you say maybe deal your damage is a mechanical input or a mechanical output, sorry. But this here, this avoid their attack is purely fictional because what is an enemy's attack? And that's a really, really good question for Dungeon World because an enemy's attack might be swallow someone whole. An enemy's attack might be what was Jason's example the other day? Gnaw off a limb. An enemy's attack might be poison their mind. So you don't avoid damage, which is a mechanical input or a mechanical output. You avoid their attack, which is a fictional output. And this is why hack and slash is a better move than you think it is. So this is also why this is super interesting as well, because you're getting a mechanical result and they're getting a fictional result. I would be inclined, if I was to rewrite this, to have on a 10 plus, you make a firm attack or something like that, and avoid their attack and avoid their retaliation. at your option, you may lean in, driving more force behind, or you may lean in to a more effective blow. Expose yourself. Now that I would put as mine, because a barbarian with forceful, messy, +3 strength, great axe should have a different effective blow than a bard with a precise rapier. And at the moment on the player side, Dungeon World doesn't do this. At the moment on the player side, Dungeon World says all characters just get to add 1d6, and all enemies get to do this really like wild stuff, right? Like, this is the thing, is that the enemies attack about like gnawing off limbs and poisoning minds and stuff like that. Like, all of this stuff, why are we not this flexible with player characters? This is why this question of flexibility is why fictional input, mechanical output, fictional output needs to happen. It's really important. So that's why I'm so tied up in this idea. That's why I'm so frustrated by moves that don't do it, because it limits players to mechanical outputs. It limits the stakes of a move to a mechanical output rather than limiting it to fictional generation, which I think PbtA should be limited by. So that's going to be one of our goals. So let's go to make a subheading here, and this is actually a bit of an insight into my process here as well, as this whole thing is. So move design philosophy is going to be about one, avoid act under fire if possible. I want to design for the space I designed for. I don't want to leave this like broad positive design space. If there's a negative design space, I want it to be there because I was intentional about it. Intentional negative design space. Our second move design philosophy is going to be fictional input, mechanical output, fictional output. And that is going to maximize table flexibility. I said before I don't want to get caught up in auteur theory, and I really do hate it. I really do hate the idea of games as voice of the creator. And a big part of that is going to be in having our moves be workable for the table. We're down to about 10 minutes left of what I want to play with today. So let's go through some more moves and talk about it. So act under fire, the outcome is in doubt. It's used where there's empty design space. That's why we're going to try and avoid it. Our examples are act under fire, which is broad and open. So act under fire has this really broad result. It's all fictional. You get a worse outcome, a hard bargain, an ugly choice. And that's actually, I think, probably the best part of act under fire. And that's I want to keep. Keep your cool is more directed. So keep your cool is like, what are you afraid of? If you fail, it happens. Or if you partial hit, it happens. The GM will tell you how the thing that you've said you're afraid of happens to you, which is great. It lets players be complicit in their own failure, which is really, really important to PbtA. The reason that this is very much a Vincent Baker design thing. It's a big part of a lot of his games. The reason that the lists are structured the way they are is that you as a player choose what bad thing happens to you, and therefore you're invested in it. For two reasons. One, it hurts more because you know you chose it for yourself. And the second, doesn't feel like you're being picked on by the system. It feels like you are complicit. I will talk about complicity another time, but it's definitely going to be a part of my design philosophy. So assess a person or assess a sitch. The reason these are really important is that they're fiction progression and they're pacing. So there's an issue that comes up in D&D every time I play it, which is there's always a bard with like +1,000,000 to persuasion who says, I want to persuade the king to give us their kingdom. I want to tell the king that we are heroes, and so he should give us 1,000 gold. And they roll persuasion and they get a natural 20, and with their +40, that's like 60. And they're like, I should get that now. And it sucks because it ruins pacing. Because when you say to the monster, I want you to do this thing and I'm willing to give you violence to make you do that, we have this pacing mechanism of HP, but like social HP isn't really a thing. There are games that use it. Fate, I'm actually a huge fan of Fate's idea that, or Fate Accelerated's idea that like you can fight someone on the social front at the same time you fight them on the physical front, and they work together. Fate Core separates that, and it pissed me off to no end, but that's fine. So these are really interesting, and I'm going to talk about Apocalypse World as the basic one, and Read a Person. So Read a Person is this one here. When you read a person in a charged interaction, so in an interaction, charged interaction for me means something where something is at stake, an interaction where something is at stake. Roll plus sharp on a 10 plus hold 3, blah, blah, blah. Okay. There's one that's really important here, which is this bottom one here. How could I get your character to do this? When you want to get something from someone and you don't want to leverage violence against them, you don't want to start from a position of violence, Read a Person is your option. And it's really cool because it asks them, what do I need to do to get you to do it? And then it gives you a roadmap of how to get there. So if I say to you, I really want the king to give us 1,000,000 gold and call us lords of the land, roll Read a Person. I get my 7 to 9. I hold 1. My question is, how could I get the king to make us lords of the land? Then the GM responds with a pacing response. So you want to beat the Lord of the Land? Sure. You want to be a Lord of the Land? Sorry. You're going to have to slay the dragon first. So go down to Whiterun and kill the dragon, and he'll make you a lord. If you slay the dragon, he's got to make you a lord. Which is great, because then we have story, and then we have excitement, and then we have adventure, and then we have progression, and we have that off a 7-9. That's really, really cool. So that's why reading people is important. I'm going to talk about Monster Hearts again. Monster Hearts does not have a read a person move. It does not have a read a person move because you're a teenager and you can't read people. Dungeon World does not have a read a person move, and I asked Adam Kober once why that was, and he said characters in Dungeon World are not good at reading people, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. It just means that you don't have a move for that when you approach the king and ask for 1,000 gold. Like, you only have parlay, and parlay's like when you have leverage on them and manipulate them, roll plus charisma. Leverage is something they need or want, which is fine, but you have no way of figuring out what they want mechanically. It's all fiction, which is, again, fine. But PbtA is about not having those empty spaces. It's about not having a spot where you have to roleplay it. It's about having moves that assist you in making those decisions. I think the other way to do it would be like spout lore about what the king wants, which is kind of weird because then you're not asking the question. You know the answer. It's doable, but it's not what the game wants you to do. But is unfortunately where people tend to push it. So why is this important to my design, to Forged in this War? Assessing people and assessing situations is about giving players ways to be proactive, whether that's proactive toward the king. So when you look at the king and say, I want this, what would it take for you to give me this? What you're saying is, I proactively want a quest so that I can go on this quest and make the game about what it's about. And I believe in quests. I believe that a lot of games basically have them. In Blades, the score is the quest. In Apocalypse World, finding food for the next day is the quest, and that's cool. So we're gonna make another one here called In My Design, or in Forged in This War. And we're gonna say avoid act under fire if possible. And then we're going to go to here and we're going to say, oh, that's another thing to talk about. Gaze into Darkness and the Psychic Maelstrom are these really interesting versions of these assessor person assessor things, where they're like really super broad and kind of weird. And I actually kind of like that as a... I think at the moment I would like it to be a little bit more about the gaze into darkness / psychic maelstrom version than the like reader version. And the reason for that is that what we want is to give that fictional flexibility. The example I'll give there is, so let's come back to Apocalypse World. So reader sit and reader charge situation have really, really dictated questions, which are great. These questions generate so much interesting fiction because they demand you ask certain questions, which is great as part of that negotiation. Open your brain to the world's psychic maelstrom is really interesting because it's like, so open your brain is weird because it doesn't have, it doesn't offer the player a mechanical way to input into it. When you open your brain, the MC tells you something new and interesting about the current situation, which is kind of fine. I kind of get that. Monster Hearts. Man, we didn't even get a chance to talk about MASH today. We're going to have to do that another time. Gaze into darkness. Or gaze into abyss. When you gaze into abyss, this is what I love. Name what you're looking for. The player inputs into it. Name what you want. Tell us what you want, and then roll with dark. On a 10 up, you get these visions, and you take +1 forward to addressing them. That is, by the way, this is a really good example of fictional output, mechanical effect, or fictional input, mechanical output. That's cool. On a 7 to 9, you get confusing alarming visions, but you get your answer nonetheless. So I think I want this kind of move more than I want the reader person, here's a listing. Because what I want this move to be is like pacing and fiction generation, right? So I'm thinking in the war zone-y kind of thing, we're probably looking at like ear to the ground or something like that, right? So we're probably saying like when you keep your ear to the ground, or like, which is like studying a situation carefully, and we want our results to be like, you get really good information from the GM. So I'm also a fan of the line, which we're going to talk about. Probably going to have to talk about that next episode because of how important the line is to writing moves. We'll talk about that when we start doing the text of moves, which will be our next step, hopefully. You get really good information from the GM. Partial hit is like some information, or like you get the information, but. So get information, but. Information. But. I wrote a game once called, well, not wrote a game once. I did a PbtA version of Dogs in the Vineyard really recently, and it's great. I really like it as a game, but it's not a game I want to keep approaching because it's so focused on coming from the point of view of the oppressors, and I have problems with this, and that's fine. So there's Dogs in Liberté. There it is. So this game is going to bring a lot of itself into Forged in this War. So let's talk about Dogs in Liberté and basic moves and where I want to do this like basic moves. So actually, this is not the best version of it to show you. I will show you the other version. So for info for everyone, the Dogs in the Vineyard is a very personal type game, as in you have to engage with people. It's very much not about how you respond to. It's not about reading sitches. It's about talking to people, and so that's why the basic move for this that I want was very much about like. You have to ask people questions. You don't say to them, "Hey, how do I get you to do this?" You have to like come at them with leverage. So let's go to have a look at this, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this move here, this when you demand truth with implicit threats, you kind of get what you want either way. So even on the partial hit, which is this bottom one here, you get what you want unless you get like this, they hold back on a little piece or they add in something untrue. And that's where I think I want this move to come from. So none of these have mechanical outputs. You have to learn your threat credibility first. They'll hold back a piece of information. They add in something untrue, are all fictional outputs, which gives it that flexibility, right? That's what we're talking about in the beginning. So we're going to say like get information, but fictional barrier. So it's like you miss a piece or a piece is wrong. On the whole, you're pretty good, but something's going to go wrong. Or they find out. This is always a good one. They find out you're asking. They find out that you're asking. That's always really good. Okay, the ask for what you want move. The ask for what you want move in Apocalypse World is the seduce or manipulate role, right? So it's about getting what you want without having to destroy something. It's a low risk move, and it tends to generate pretty high outcomes, which is why I don't like it for what it is. So again, Monster Hearts does it fucking great. So let's talk about Apocalypse Worlds first. So seduce or manipulate. When you try and seduce or manipulate, bluff, fast talk, lie, tell them what you want them to do, give them a reason, and roll plus hot. On a 10 plus, they'll go along with it. On a 7 to 9, they need some concrete assurance, corroboration, or evidence first. This is really interesting because, again, fictional. Totally fictional move. There's no mechanical. You don't mark +1 favor with an NPC or anything like that. They just go along with it until some factor action betrays the reason you gave them, which is fine, right? As long as you can keep that up. Now, the reason I don't like these moves in something like Apocalypse World is there's almost no reason not to seduce someone before you decide to shoot them. Because there's so little risk to it, except for like the general 6- move. Like if I walk up to someone and I go, "Hey, Rolf Ball, I want you to give me all your water," and he's like, "Dog, no." And you're like, "No, if you give me all your water, I'll bang you." And he goes, "Oh, well, roll plus." I got a 7 to 9. He needs some concrete assurance, corroboration, or evidence first. You're gonna have to bang him before he gives you the water. And you're like, "Nah, just shoot him, or I just go aggro." It's kind of weird. I don't want that escalation, that inherent like driving escalation. Why is Monster Hearts really good at this again? Monster Hearts does not have an ask for what you want move. It has this move about pulling strings, which is tempt them to do what you want. The way that you get strings, though, are inherently are inherently like complicated. So when you turn someone on, you get a string and they choose a reaction. So on a 10 plus, on the best outcome you can get on turn someone on, they're either going to give themselves to you, which might not be what you want because it's too complicated. They promise something they think you want, which can be incredibly complicated. Or they get embarrassed and act awkward, which can be anything from uncomfortable to violent. Shut someone down is like this bitchy schoolyard thing. When you shut someone down, roll with cold on a 10 plus, they lose a string on you. If they have no strings, you get one on them. It's like this big power play, right? And that's why I love the way that Monster Hearts does asking for things, because you don't get to just ask for something. Dungeon World's parlay sucks. We can all work on this, and it sucks for the reason I talked about before. When you have leverage on a character, roll plus charisma, leverage is something they need or want. On a hit, you get it. On a 7 to 9, they need concrete assurance. It's so much less engaging, and it's even less engaging than Apocalypse World, because at least in Apocalypse World, giving stuff up matters, because in Apocalypse World, everything is so scarce. Like time and sex and food and water and all these things that you're going to have to offer to NPCs, you also want. But in Dungeon World, there's like, it's that economy problem of like adventurers run in a gold piece economy and peasants run in a copper piece economy thing, which means that like you don't, you always have things to offer them that aren't going to cost you shit, which is frustrating, which is incredibly frustrating. Is this Mash's basic moves? Yes, it is. All right, let's find Mash's basic moves. Where is it? Influence. If you're trying to influence someone to get what you want by manipulating and seducing them, blah, 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 by pulling rank. For NPCs on a 10 plus, they do what you ask. When pulling rank, the NPC does what you ask only grudgingly with a minimum amount of effort. On 7 to 9 for manipulation or seduction. See, this is weird because it breaks out like even further. Why are these the same move if they have different stakes? Oh man, I love MASH. See, that's the thing. I haven't played this game, but I'm medical or studying to be a medical professional in my off time, and like I love the series, and like there's so much about it, and I fucking hate this move. So let's stop talking about things that aren't, and let's start talking about things that are. So what do we want our ask for what you want move to be like? So I think we want watching this war. I think we want our move to be Monster Heartsy, in that you don't just get it. Like on a 10 plus, they'll tell you how to get it. They'll tell you what it'll take. On a 7 to 9 or on a partial, they'll like they'll tell you what it'll take, but and that to me is so much more interesting, right? So it's about pacing and development, and about everyone wants what you want. Everyone needs what you need. So remember, we're doing this story about like scavengers in the middle of a war, right? And so we're going to talk about like they want whatever you have the least of. That's a really, really cool 7 to 9 in my opinion. So like if you have like 2 scrap or like no food or whatever, that's what they want. And that's fucking tight. That makes me really happy. Take what you want. So take what you want moves are really, really interesting because again, they're usually a physical violence move. So I'm actually not going to talk about Monster Hearts in this one because physical violence is a really weak part of Monster Hearts by design, by intent. So let's talk about seizing by force. Battle moves in Apocalypse World are in a separate section, aren't they? Battle moves. Here we go. Seize by force. Seize by force. To seize someone by force, exchange harm. Cool. And then on a 10 plus, choose 3. on a miss, choose 1. There is a change that was made to Seize by Force that I really like in the Fallen Empires version, or whatever the like medieval dark fantasy version of this is called, where instead of impress, dismay, and frighten your enemy, it's like nothing of value gets damaged. And I like that so much more for 2 reasons. One, that is almost never an interesting thing. By the time we get to Seize by Force, people just want to kill each other. They don't want to impress, dismay, and frighten people. They just want them fucking dead. The other problem I have with it is that this variations thing, like, if this is meant to do, if Seize by Force as a move is meant to do the negotiating for us and do the compromising for us, we then have this like extra compromise that sticks out on top. And so we actually go through like 3 levels of compromise. We choose that we're doing a move and what that move is. We choose which version of the move that is. Then we roll, and then we have these. And like, it's super weird. So I would just, to be honest, just have all of these on the one list, and then you can pick them or you can't. If you want them, you get them, and like, and just be more interesting in the way that's kind of written. So, which other act up did I want to talk about? Oh, I want to talk about Command. Where is, okay, I want to talk about Command because I hate Command. I'm sorry, Sean Gomez, again. I have a lot of respect for your design and for this, but Command, in my opinion, is this really, really weak move, especially because it's a little bit differently written here than it is in the book. In the book, it's like when you command a group of NPCs who would follow you or something like that, which is really uninteresting, because if they should follow me, why am I rolling? It's super weird. I also don't like the will not accept a new command as the only mechanical output. Significantly impacted is kind of weird. Like, why not just have it be significantly impacted, and we'll look at what that means? Because yeah, I just think it's weird. So the important thing with the take move, with the take what you want move, is that it costs you. So in my opinion, the important thing is that it costs you. Where's the moves? The hunters. There's moves in here somewhere. Basic hunter moves. They are. It's a lot further down than I thought it would be when I first read this book. Okay. Kick some ass. You force them where you want them. You get what you like. You make them dead and all that sort of stuff. On any success, you inflict harm and suffer harm from whatever you're fighting. Sorry, I'm doing this with way too small text for you. You inflict harm on and suffer harm from whatever you're fighting. This is really important to me. This is a key part, is that when you take what you want, it costs you. Doesn't matter how good you are, how good you roll, it's going to cost you. Vincent Baker has, because this all springs from Apocalypse World, Vincent Baker has very specific views on violence that come through a lot in Dogs in the Vineyard. And it also comes through in Apocalypse World, insofar as when you seize by force, you don't have an opportunity to not take harm. You don't come from a position of strength. If you came from a position of strength, it would be going aggro, which is great. I fucking love it. I think it's great. I think it's better than the... I think the Dungeon World move is really good in that it lets you avoid the attack but choose to push through and take the attack to get an extra benefit, which I really dig. So in our game, or in Forged in this War, which is our game, we're sharing it. I'll give you a co-writing credit. When you take what you want, it's going to cost you. And then maybe on a 10 plus or on a full hit, you... it won't cost you, but you can put some mustard on it. But that will cost you. That's an interesting outcome for me, is that like the Dungeon World hack and slash type thing, which is like, you're in this really dominant position. Do you push or do you handle it? And I like that. I'm a fan. Help or interfere. I could talk about help or interfere for days. I'm actually going to do another. I'm going to do an episode entirely on aid moves and how they work, because I think they're so interesting, and I think that they're not looked at well enough. We're going to talk about that later date. It's like third, fourth episode, whatever. Open your brain. We've already talked about that with Gaze into Darkness, which is that it tends to be an assess move with a less fixed fictional trigger. Make Dead with Bullets. So Make Dead with Bullets is really interesting because it's some games split Take What You Want and Make Dead with Bullets. Take What You Want in Apocalypse World is actually probably go aggro, and then where you make a demand and you might get it, or you might have to pull your trigger. So it's kind of this really split thing. And then Make Dead with Bullets is that Seize by it's actually just the go ham move, whatever it's called. It's like exchange harm or something. And the move in Apocalypse World is actually just you deal harm to each other. You don't even roll, I don't think. Single combat. Oh no, that's right. There is a roll. Let's talk about that then. Just very, very quickly, because Apocalypse World does what I was just talking about with Dungeon World. When you do single combat, no quarters, you exchange harm. But first roll plus hard. On a 10 plus, you get both. On a 7 to 9, you choose one. So in Apocalypse World, you get that mustard question that I gave before on a 7 to 9. It's actually a little bit different. So in Apocalypse World, it's 7 to 9 is you're safe because you're not really safe because you still take some harm, but you're safer because you can pick the exchange, like the -1 harm. But if you choose to veto -1 harm, you get +1 harm, which is cool, right? And that's really cool, because it gives this really, that's the Dungeon World thing of like, do you push yourself? Do you overextend? Do you get in there? Like, what's it worth to you? What's the risk? And I would probably like to see that on the 10 plus move, and I'd probably like to see the 7 to 9 just be like for me, it would be honest. I would balance the game around you suffer little harm, you suffer -1 harm. And I would have the 10 plus result be you can take +1 harm to deal with +1 harm, because that's kind of the way that interests me. I rather like the way that single combat ends as well, which is you make a choice if it's worth it to you to keep fighting. Cartel is a really important one to talk about violence, because there's so much wrapped up in Cartel that I'm not educated enough to talk about, insofar as I'm not involved in the narco scene at all. I don't know anything about it. I've barely even touched narco fiction. I have watched like 3 episodes of The Wire. That's great, but I know I need to watch more. When you turn to violence in Cartel, there are 2 parts to it that I want to talk about. One is roll with savagery. On a hit, you trade harm, 10 plus, choose 3, 7 to 9, choose 2. You inflict terrible harm, you suffer little harm, you resist marking stress, you avoid collateral damage. This is all awesome. I love that you resist marking stress is a choice. I love that it's a decision that you have to spend a resource, which is one of your hold, to not freak out about the fact that you just shot someone. That's one thing about Cartel. We're going to talk about the other part of Cartel now, which is when you get shot. Okay. Harm. When you get fucking shot, by the way, Mark Diaz Truman, I love this. I love this and I love you. When you get fucking shot, roll. That is like so visceral, right? That is such a good harm move. When you take harm, it's boring. When you get fucking shot, roll. Add 1 for each. Is it a handgun? I don't know how that happened. It's because I'm still here for some reason. When you get shot, you add 1 for each escalation mechanic. That's cool. On a hit, you'll live. On a 10 plus, it's a minor but heroic wound. That's cool. On a 7 to 9, you choose 1 and the shooter chooses 1. It's bloody, you'll die without immediate aid. It's messy. The wound will leave an impressive scar. It's painful, -1 ongoing. You know what I love about you, Mark Diaz Truman? Fictional outputs, mechanical outputs, fictional, mechanical. You're amazing and I love you. That's probably more fictional, by the way. That's definitely mechanical. You'll die is mechanical. I love this move for that reason, and I love so much of it. We're going to put that down as an example of a move that we want to look towards. We're also going to look towards a different move, which is the pull the trigger move from Dog's PbtA. Dogs in the Vineyard, as I said before, says a lot about violence from Vincent Baker's perspective, and I believe that my version of it says a lot about violence as well. So when you pull the trigger, first take 1 stress. This was actually... I had not read the Cartel Quick Start when I wrote this move, so this is cool. Mark, you and I, same page, mate. When you pull the trigger, first take 1 stress, then spend Demonic Influence, roll plus spend. We'll talk about the Demonic Influence mechanic another time. On an 8 to 10, you commit as much violence as you intend. So this is your full hit. You commit as much violence as you intend. They're as wounded as you need them to be. Do you want them to be dead? They're dead. Do you want them to be wounded? They're wounded. You are in control of violence. On an 11 plus, there's no room for subtlety in the West. Choose 1. The wound is big and vital. They'll die here right now without feeling much. The wound is dirty and rough. They'll die tomorrow in a whole lot of pain. This move says something that I want to say about violence. And so I'm going to keep that very similar in this game. So the Make Dead with Bullets is going to be similar to Cartel's Get Fucking Shot, similar to Dog's PbtA Pull the Trigger. And what I want it to be is, I think the way I want it is, when you commit violence, right? Like when you commit violence, full hit, pick 1. Partial hit, both. Both. And then it's going to be like, they'll be in pain for days. They'll die. What I like about this is that on a full hit, you can wound someone as much as you need them to be. By the way, we need a we need a fictional input here. So it's like you wound them as much as you intend to. 1. Partial hit. Violence is uncontrolled. Both. So this move, the reason this move speaks to me and the reason I really want this move to be like this is that I want violence to be visceral. And I don't mean visceral in that I'm not going to have harm for the PCs. I don't care about PC violence. I don't care about, PC harm and damage and hit points. What I care about is when you hurt someone, they'll be in pain for days. Or they'll die. Or worst case, like that partial hit, worst case is both. They're going to be in pain for days and then they're going to die. And that, I think, is the kind of story that we want to tell with violence in this game. Great. So I'm coming up against my time limit now as I'm about to play my Lady Blackbird game in 10 minutes. But that is the beginning approach to moves and move design. So let's talk about next episode. So next episode of this, we're going to discuss aid moves, I think. So it's either going to be help, aid, interfere moves and why they're important, or it's going to be help, aid, interfere moves and why they all suck except for Monster Hearts and Night Witches. And you know what? Monster Hearts, I'm gonna tell you this one. You're not. I love you, Avery. I have so much respect for the work that you've done and for what Monster Hearts brings to the culture, but Night Witches does it better. And we're going to talk about why Night Witches is so fucking good at aid moves. And then after that, we're going to talk about move design. So we're going to actually, yeah. And then after that, we're going to talk about core. Because move design doesn't actually need core mechanic. It doesn't need things like stats, how many dice, what size the dice, anything like that, odds. It doesn't care about that shit. All it cares about is, in PbtA, full, partial, and miss. So we're going to talk about move design. And then after that, we'll talk about core mechanic, about what smoke is and how I stole it from a French guy. Right. I will see you possibly tomorrow, possibly a couple of days, depending on my university schedule, as to our next episode, when we will continue to draw the owl. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm very, very grateful for your time, and I'm grateful that you let me design in your ear, as it were. As always, the games that I've mentioned here are phenomenal from both from either a learning experience or a play experience. I would recommend that the ones we talked about today are Cartel by Mark D.S. Truman. Especially check out how he approaches violence in that game. Monster Hearts, check out how they approach asking for things from people. That's by Avery Adler, sorry, and is worth your time. What else to talk about? Uncharted Worlds by Sean Gomez. I honestly think it's worth reading and seeing how inspired you are by that. Apocalypse World, and also, sorry, it's also a good game. Like it's got a lot of interesting stuff about like how it does cargo moves, and like the stuff that happens in town is really, really well done with it. And we'll talk about that more another time, I'm sure. And Apocalypse World, Demons Baker. Worth looking at. Also, we mentioned Blades in the Dark by John Harper, and I have no idea who wrote Monster of the Week. Michael Sands. Michael, I've never spoken to you before. I've never met you. If you would like to get in touch with me, I'd love to have a chat with you about your work and stuff like that. Actually, and Sean, I'd love to have a chat with you too if you want to. I'd love to hear your passion for Uncharted Worlds and why it matters to you. And then we can have a chat. And Night Witches, Jason Morningstar. We're gonna talk about that. If you want some homework, get Night Witches, read it, find the aid move, read the aid move, and think about why it's so good. And then I will talk to you about why I think the aid move is so good next time we speak. A pleasure as always. Keep drawing that owl.